Springtime is here in Middle Tennessee, and it's time to have the uncomfortable conversation that nobody wants to have, whether you're a tree company or a homeowner. This is a big problem in the industry, and it's time for it to be discussed. Topping trees is a horrible practice, is a horrible method of pruning trees. It's a horrible maintenance method that's been around for a long time, and it's an old school method that needs to come to an immediate stop. So topping is essentially where you just cut the canopy out of the tree, which is not great because the tree relies on the canopy to capture in the sunlight, to go through photosynthesis, to eat, to live, to breathe. Not to breathe, but to turn CO2 into oxygen. To get the general idea of it is when you take the canopy out of the tree to prevent you either have a structure under it and you're worried about large overhanging branches, or the tree's getting too tall and it's worrying you. I mean, there's a bunch of different reasons why people think that topping is necessary, and it's not. So where we tried to lead people after we go through the whole why we don't top thing is we try to lead them to what we call either weight reduction, or you can call it selective pruning, deadwood removal, whatever you want to call it. So what we'll do is somebody will call us out. They'll be like, hey, we want this tree top. We give them the spiel why we don't do it, try to educate, which is important. Then we were like, okay, this is what we can do. We can do what we call weight reduction, which is where you go through and kind of remove a lot of the useless branches inside the tree. Ultimately impacts like how much weight these branches are having to carry. So if you go through and get rid of all like the interior branches that they don't hold leaves, they're not doing anything productive, you can get rid of all that, removes weight from the tree. It helps prevent splits where a tree breaks off and hits somebody's house or a fence. Also, we do like a deadwood removal. So we'll go through anything that's dead, we'll clean that out. So when you go through and top it, essentially what you're doing is you're going, and it varies on trees. Like a lot of people around here, if you've seen crepe myrtles, you'll see like where you have your main trunks, and then where it forks, people will start to top it there. And that's okay, because crepe myrtles are also, again, kind of one of those trees that you don't really have many options on maintenance other than doing that, or you'll have a 40-foot tall crepe myrtle that's already weak in structure as it is. Without getting too far into the weeds on the whys and why nots, a couple of the main things to point out of why it's so bad is essentially when you top a tree, you're removing, especially if you're removing more than 20% of the canopy, you're removing a large portion of the canopy at one time, which basically it stresses the shit out of the tree. What happens is, a lot of times you'll see if a tree's been topped, it'll start shooting out all those tiny little branches all up and down the trunk that look like crap. That's basically the tree saying, oh shit, I've lost a large portion of my leaf structure, and now I have to produce as many leaves as possible to try to go catch sunlight to go through photosynthesis to eat. So that's one of the biggest reasons why not to top them. The other one is when you do top them, the growth that comes back is a lot weaker than the original growth of the tree. So essentially, you cut it, you'll have all this fast new growth and it looks decent. All that is gonna be an ongoing maintenance problem that you're gonna struggle with for years to come. And so the third reason why you don't top trees is because it looks like shit. Aesthetically, it's not pleasing. It makes them look like a lollipop. It's just, overall, it's a horrible practice that's been around for a long time that needs to come to an end. I will say, there is one tree in Tennessee that is okay to top because you really have no other choice. It's either that or remove the tree, and that is the infamous Bradford pear. So Bradford pears got really popular in the 90s and early 2000s, especially in like commercial settings, because they're a really fast growing tree and they look pretty for about a week when they bloom. The problem is that the Bradford pears have a really weak structure to them. So if you don't constantly trim them back and top them, they eventually start to get too big where they just start breaking and splitting, and then it becomes a maintenance problem. You have insurance claims because they're taking out fences, they're taking your gutters off your house. In my opinion, those are the only trees that are okay to top. And even then, I always try to recommend people just have them removed, because the flip side of having them topped is that's an ongoing project. Every 3 to 5 years, you're gonna have to call me back out and pay me money to top them, when you could pay me a one-time fee and we just get rid of it entirely. And another part of that is like, especially now, the state of Tennessee is doing a lot to combat Bradford pears. There's some programs where if you remove one, they'll come install and plant a completely native to Tennessee tree in its place. There's a lot of tree companies that are involved in trying to. So another big thing, what we try to practice whenever we show up to do an estimate or give our opinion on a tree or a project, whatever it is, and it leads back into the whole topping situation, is that not only is your job as a tree service to obviously resolve whatever problem the client has, whether that's a removal or they've got overhanging branches that need to be gone because they're, interfering with utility lines of the house. You're also supposed to kind of hold the client's hand and be educational about it. Showing up to a job and just automatically saying yes to whatever the client wants you to do is not a good practice to have, because you can say yes and then you end up just, because the client wants half the tree cut down, you're going to end up just destroying that tree. So what we try to do is not only figure out what the client wants, figure out what their needs are, but we also try to take the time to educate the client, especially when we have people call out and say, hey, we want this 100-year-old oak tree topped. This is the reasons why we don't do that. We try to take the time to really explain to our clients why, the whys and why nots of what we do, and what the consequences of doing this are. But at the same time, you have to make sure they're still getting what they want. So it's just kind of fine line that you have to ride, and I think it's something we do pretty good at, and it's always beneficial for not only you as a tree service, but for the client to just take that extra 10, 15 minutes to kind of explain the science behind things and why you should do things this way. One thing that's important, or technically two things that are really important when you're planning on moving any type of dirt, or you're doing a land clearing project or a development project, or you're building a house, whatever it may be, it's good to be proactive on the front end and decide, okay, what trees do we want to keep and what trees do we want to get rid of? If you're wanting to keep certain trees, it's always good to obviously communicate that, especially with your builder. Because a lot of times, I don't know if you've ever been on a job site, you'll notice that things can get a little chaotic. There'll be stuff strewn everywhere. There'll be dumpsters, you got equipment, you got trucks. So if you're planning on keeping trees, it's always good to be proactive, and it's called, what we call, it's TPZ. It's where we go through and we basically measure where the drip lines of the root system is going to be, and we'll go through and stake that off and fence that area off. That way there's no foot traffic, there's no equipment traffic, there's no vehicle traffic going over the top of that, there's not rocks being dumped, lumber packages, you name it. Ultimately, that's going to give you the best odds to be able to keep that tree for your home or whatever project you're doing, while still being able to manipulate the landscape around it. Also, the second thing with that is trees that you're going to want to get rid of. A lot of times that we run into situations where people are either going to do an addition on their home, or they're building a shop, or they're building a house, or they're building some sort of structure, and in the beginning they kind of just eyeball it and say, oh yeah, we think that tree can stay for now, like it's going to be fine, it's not going to be in the way of the building pad, yada yada. Well, then what happens is when they get into it, they realize that that tree is now 2 foot off of their new building pad for their addition that they're putting in, and it has to go. At the end of the day, yes, we can always remove it. It's no problem. We get paid to be problem solvers just as much as we get paid to remove the trees. But it is always cheaper for you as a client to go ahead and take the time to measure out and really think about, where your new addition is going to fall in relation to trees around your property, because that can be the difference between, we're talking thousands of dollars. I mean, if you construct a big building and all of a sudden there's this massive oak tree on the backside of it that's going to die because you dug through the root base of it, and the only way to get it out is with a crane now, you're talking about a massive price difference than it would have been in the beginning to go ahead and have it removed before there was anything built. So again, just trying to have that proactive mindset and take the extra steps to kind of figure out and map out exactly what you have planned and what you need to do with the surrounding trees can not only save you a lot of time, but it can also save you a lot of money. So the whole process is, to break this down for everybody, is like, we'll get a call, we'll come out, and they're like, hey, we want this tree top. After we kind of go through our little educational moment with them and explain to them why we don't top trees, then we bring it into the conversation of, okay, like what we can do to resolve your issue. And a lot of times, and in most cases, it's going to be weight reduction is going to be your main one, dead wood removal, and we can still trim the tree slightly and still get a pretty good result, or close to what you're wanting. So with the weight reduction, essentially what we do is we go through, especially if you have some large branches that lean really hard towards structures, you'll have a bunch of smaller branches along that branch. We'll try to remove any of those. We'll go through the entire tree and just try to remove any of those interior branches that don't really make any sense. They're not really being productive. They don't have any real leaf structure. They're not really assisting the tree in any way. We'll get rid of those. Not only is that, you know, considered weight reduction, but it's also more aesthetically pleasing. It looks better. The tree's got a cleaner shape. Also, we'll go through and do all the dead wood. So any dead branches in the top, along the trunk, anything like that, we'll go ahead and remove that. That way it removes the liability of something falling down, maybe hit somebody. You know, you're on the mower on Saturday cutting grass and a branch falls and hits you and knocks you out. We try to do preventative measures or we try to do stuff to prevent that.